Hi everyone, this is just a short explanation of what to do for the pre-writing exercises that are coming up soon. Before I do that, I want to show you something on the syllabus that might alleviate some of your fears or concerns about the class or about what might be due or expected soon. Now, if we look at what we have here on Saturday, August the 29th, this is a pre-writing homework assignment. It is just a homework assignment, a teeny tiny homework assignment that's part of the writing process. But I want to scroll through and show you when the first essay is due so that we don't kind of panic and think it's due way sooner than it really is. And we'll see that in week 5 we have the rough draft due, so that's a month from now. And then in week 6 we have the peer reviews and the revised draft. And then in week 7 we have the final draft due. So we will spend almost the first half of the semester on the first essay, and we will go very slowly through the writing process so that you get a handle on that. And then our second and third papers will follow that same exact process, but they will be on a shorter timetable because we won't have to spend as much time going through, the elements of the process. We'll still repeat them, we'll still get practice on them, and the lecture notes will still be tailored toward the subjects that we'll write about in essays 2 and 3. But we'll be able to work at a slightly faster pace for the second and third papers. But I want everybody to be successful. I don't want anybody to be scared. I'm here to help at every step of the way. So there will be a lot of, kind of step-by-step instruction all the way through. So I just wanted to say that because I know some students were kind of afraid or thinking that maybe the first essay was due this Saturday and it's not, and they were kind of maybe mistaking that for the pre-writing quiz or pre-writing homework, and I just wanted to clarify that it's just a small homework assignment that's due this Saturday. It's not the big paper. We have plenty of time to do that. So take a deep breath and relax. It's all good and we've got plenty of time. Okay, so let me jump back over into our class, and I'm sure you already saw on the syllabus, if you didn't, the few things that you need to read in order to do that assignment are the lecture notes that, and let me go ahead and make that a little bit bigger, the lecture notes that introduce the writing process and this unit, and the assignment sheet. So let's take a look at the assignment sheet first, and then I'll show you the lecture notes and then I'll explain. Okay, so the assignment sheet gives us a couple of options, and then the third option is to come up with your own. So one of the things that we have to do, that you have to write about fear, but we don't really know what, other than option 1 gives you the choice of writing a paper that shows how we can overcome our fears. Option 2 gives you the opportunity to write one that reveals what we could learn from them. But if you didn't like either one of those, or if you come up with something more interesting, you can develop your own thesis on the topic of fear. And just to kind of review, and this is coming up in a subsequent lesson where we'll talk more about thesis development, but just so we clarify right now, a thesis is a writer's claim on the subject under discussion. And it is what you believe, it is what you are trying to prove throughout the course of your paper. And by definition, a thesis must be open to debate. It must have some element of opinion in it that potentially other people could disagree with. And so the basis of writing the papers in this class is about making a case, about making a persuasive case that shows other people that your claim is valid and, worth listening to. So those are the 3 topics that you have, and the third one is kind of completely open-ended and you don't know what you might come up with there. And so in order to come up with some things, we have to do some things. And that first thing is to do this pre-writing assignment on fear. And the whole purpose of that is to get your thoughts, your experiences, your attitudes, your assumptions, all those things out of your brain and onto paper. Will you use all of it in your paper? No, not necessarily. Will you use any of it in your paper? You may or you may not. But what we hope to get out of this pre-writing exercise is kind of an indication about which thing you want to write about. You might end up stumbling on your own thesis throughout the course of your pre-writing, because we really have 2 aspects to the pre-writing. We have the one that I'll explain here in just a minute. And then when we start going through the videos and the readings, and we start doing some research and figuring out not only what other people say about the subject of fear, but what we think about that, because just because they say something or write something about the subject of fear doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, doesn't mean that you buy into it. You have to respond and react and figure out where you stand in the midst of all of this. So that's another aspect of pre-writing, because you're doing it before you're actually writing. You are still formulating ideas. You're still doing all those things while you're reading other sources, while you're watching videos on the topic of fear. So all of this kind of preliminary legwork in my book is a form of pre-writing. It's the stuff you do before you actually sit down to write your paper. So let's take a look at the actual pre-writing exercise example that I put on the assignment link, and it's also in the module. And this is an example of what yours will look like. And I think what might be confusing some people is that some people are saying that, oh, well, this one's on the subject of courage. Am I supposed to do it on courage? Am I doing it on fear? And so that's why I put the note right here. And I put a note under the assignment link too, to kind of remind everyone that our paper and this whole unit is on the subject of fear. But sometimes when I do models for students of assignments that they're doing in class, sometimes I will do them on a different topic, just so I don't cloud your thinking or interfere with the creative process of you coming up with your own ideas. So courage is kind of correlated to fear. It's not exactly the opposite of fear, because a person could be courageous and still fearful, but I think courage is the ability to act in spite of being afraid of something. So I thought I would write about this and use that as a topic as the basis for this pre-writing assignment, just to show you what to do. And so this is actually, what I would have us do if we were in class. We would talk about the introduction of the unit, the paper, what it's about, and then I would just invite everybody to get out a piece of paper and a pen. Since we're all at home right now, you would open a Word file and put a heading on it, and your title will say Pre-writing Exercises on Fear instead of Courage. And then you'll start with questioning, and then the idea is you list as many questions as you can on the topic of fear. That's it. And you don't judge yourself. You just list as many questions as you possibly can. So just as I'm sitting here thinking off the top of my head, I might start out with questions like, what do people fear most? Now, obviously, I'm not a mind reader, and I couldn't, speak for everyone. But if I posed a question like that, I would be wondering, what is the most common fear? What is the biggest fear? And I'm not looking anything up. It's like, what is my assumption about that? So I'm just listing that as a question. I'm not even worried about answering it at this point. I might ask all kinds of questions. I might ask, what is the function of fear in society? How does fear control or influence our actions and our behaviors, our ideas, our attitudes? And I'm just going to ask whatever questions pop to mind, and I'm going to list as many as I can. Now, I didn't quantify it on here, but I would say try to aim for somewhere between 10 and 15, kind of more on the 15 side than the 10 side, because the idea is that you want to have a lot of questions to choose from. Not all of your questions are going to be the most thought-provoking. Some of your questions might require research. Some might just be these kind of big questions that, we might want to know or have a curiosity about. And you list those things, just as many as you can. And then when you're done with that, the second part is to answer them. But you don't answer all of them, because not all of your questions are necessarily ones that, you really think you have a lot to say about. Some of them might require research, and some of them, upon second look, maybe you thought, oh, I really don't want to answer that one. So pick a handful of questions that are thought-provoking, that you think you might have something to say about, and you answer those in a nice, meaty paragraph. And you try to be as specific as you can, because these pre-writing exercises are done for you. They're not really for me. I am asking you to do them I am taking them for a grade to get you to do them, but the reality is that the pre-writing stage of the writing process is often the one that is most neglected. And so when you're looking at those pre-writing notes and you see that I use an acronym to help me remember the stages of the writing process, and that acronym is PADRE. And the P stands for pre-writing, the A stands for arrangement, and that's where you do an outline. So the pre-writing is this stuff that we're doing right here, plus the research, kind of the taking notes of your sources, the processing that, figuring out what you think about what other people have to say, and, coming up with your working thesis. And then you got the arrangement part, creating an outline, having a plan before you draft. And the D is for drafting. Well, what happens is that when students are left to their own devices, and I can say this because I was a student once too, and I took what I thought were a lot of shortcuts. If it wasn't for a grade, I wasn't doing it, and I was just going to wait until something was due, and then I'm just going to kind of jump in and do it with my back against the wall and kind of hope for the best. But that is not really the best strategy, and I've kind of learned this over time, that it's better to break things up into manageable chunks and work on those, and it gives you a better opportunity to work to the best advantage and to produce the best work that you can. And so this pre-writing part of the process is often neglected. So in a writing class, I think it's important for us to emphasize it. But when you move forward into your other classes, nobody will probably ask you to turn in your pre-writing. They're just going to give you an assignment and let you figure it out on your own. Part of the task of this course is for me to help you come up with processes and strategies that you can translate into your other courses or adapt into your other courses, because your other classes might require different kinds of writing, but the process is still the same. And you'll see later in some of the materials, I actually have a video from a chemistry professor who has written and published over 400 papers, and he talks about the same things I do in terms of writing being a process. It's really like an algorithm. It's a series of steps that you follow, of processes that you follow, that make it easier for you to get from point A to point B and to produce a good paper. Okay, so back to the pre-writing assignment that you're doing for this weekend. You pick out 3 or 4 questions from your list of things that you think are thought-provoking and that you have something to say about, and you answer them in a nice, meaty paragraph. So I think I answered, 3 or 4, and notice they're a nice, meaty paragraph. So a good rule of thumb for a paragraph length is half a page, give or take. You could certainly go beyond that in terms of what you're doing here for the pre-writing exercise, but the point is that you shouldn't have just 2 or 3 lines for an answer. It should be a nice, meaty paragraph. So I answered 3 or 4 of those, and then I went on to the next technique, which is brainstorming. Now, brainstorming technically has 2 aspects to it. It's got the part where you can just think on your own, and so that's what I've asked you to do here. And when you brainstorm on your own, all you do is you list whatever pops to mind, and you don't judge yourself on the topic under discussion. In this case, it is the topic of fear. So you would just list anything that comes to mind on the topic of fear. It could be books, it could be movies, it could be TV shows, current events, the pandemic, COVID-19, and the whole circumstances that have arisen from that. That's a great thing to list here. I've had people list movies like the film It, for example. I haven't seen it, but I know it has something to do with children who have fears and something about overcoming them. And you can list all of these things. You can list claims. So if you notice here in mine about courage, I just listed some things that I believe to be true, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to act in spite of it. I think that's why it's so admirable. I don't know that there would be much to admire if somebody just didn't have the mechanisms in their brain that allowed them to be fearful. I think they would just be maybe reckless. And I think there's a difference between being reckless or doing things that are dangerous and acting courageously. And another thing, courage is admired and seen as a virtue, and we probably wish we had more of it. And so I just kind of list the things and the ideas that I have. And then I have some things on here that are kind of dumb. but I don't judge myself when I'm brainstorming. So when I was thinking about the topic of courage, it made me think of the show Courage the Cowardly Dog. And then I just wrote myself a note to think about that more, to, give myself an excuse to watch an episode of it. What is the point of that? Could I get anything out of it? And I really liked what I came up with here in terms of The Cowardly Lion and the Wizard of Oz. It's a classic book, classic old movie. And that might be something that if I were writing a paper on courage, maybe I might use that in the hook for the introduction. So you just list things. And in the brainstorming category, you're not putting questions. That's for the question category or technique. This one, you're just listing. So this could be phrases. It could be whole sentences, but it won't be questions. It's just going to be claims, or it could be listing of things that have to do with the topic of fear. The other aspect of brainstorming is when you talk with other people. When I'm in a face-to-face class, we would brainstorm together. So what I would do is I would give you a few minutes to brainstorm on the topic of fear, and then I would stop you and we would talk about it together as a class. And that would kind of get us going in terms of conversation. Then after a little while, I would say, okay, guys, we need to stop that and let's go on to the next one. And then we would move on to free writing. And for this one, all you have to do is write freely without stopping on the topic of fear, and don't judge yourself. So the whole idea is just to get your ideas down about fear, whatever is popping into your mind at the moment in which you do this. Now, I set an arbitrary time of 6 minutes, so I ask that you write for at least 6 minutes. So set a timer on your phone so that you can do that. If you're on a roll, though, keep on going, because the point is to generate ideas, and you certainly don't want to cut off the flow of ideas if you're onto something. But by the same token, that 6 minute time limit forces you to do at least that much. And so when I was doing this little exercise, I set the timer, and that's how far, and I even wrote a note to myself and a note to you to say that's how far I got in 6 minutes. And so that's also how I know about how far you ought to be able to get in 6 minutes, because you can't stop, you can't look at the blank piece of paper, and that doesn't include think time. The point is to just write what's coming into your brain at this moment in time. And then after you do that, you go back through, and even though that paragraph is probably going to be all over the place, that's okay. You're going to have a lot of ideas to choose from. So then you pick something specific, you highlight it or underline it, and then you skip down, and then you'll write for 6 minutes more on that particular aspect that you highlighted, in your pre-writing assignment about the topic of fear. But this time, it's going to be focused free writing for 6 minutes. Instead of writing about anything that has to do with fear that's popping into your mind, you'll be writing about that one specific thing that you looked at and you thought to yourself, hey, I can write about that for an additional 6 minutes just on that one thing. So the nice thing about this second paragraph is that it should be more unified and more about just a single aspect of fear. And this exercise will hopefully, give us some things to start with. Oftentimes when I go through and when I'm grading these, I will see some of the most amazing things. I will see things that might be potential things that could be used in a paper. And it's a good way to kind of start the conversation with yourself about this topic of fear. And later we'll get to have conversations with each other about the topic of fear and about the things that we're reading and watching together as we explore this unit and get ready to write the paper. But before we write the paper, you have to come up with a thesis. You have to decide which prompt you're going to use. If you're going to use one of mine, then the angle is kind of already suggested for you, but you still have to come up with the answers, not on your own, but through the process of research. So this is just a homework assignment. Now, how long is yours going to be? It's going to be roughly the same length as mine, but mine is a little bit longer than it appears to be, or a little bit shorter than it appears to be, rather, because I have these little notes to you in here. So if we scroll to page 7, all these things on page 7 are kind of notes to you. So, if I took out all the notes to you, the students, then it looks like mine would be about 6 pages. Yours probably won't be that long, but it'll probably be at least, say 4 pages, maybe 4 pages and some change and so on, because again, you're just trying to generate ideas, and this whole thing is double spaced. So when you double space things, it makes things look longer than they really are. It's took me probably about an hour to an hour and a half. I think it took me about an hour and a half to do this pre-writing assignment here, because I really thought about it, and it took me, a little bit of time to answer my own questions and things like that. But that's it in a nutshell. That's all you're doing for this weekend, just kind of getting the ideas flowing on the topic of fear as we prepare to go into the next week. And as long as you follow directions and you do it in the spirit with which it is intended, and you don't skimp, you'll get full credit on it. But the value of this assignment is not on the credit or not on the points that are assigned to it, but on the ideas that it has the potential to yield. And that's the value of all the homework assignments that we do, is the potential that they have, if you do them in the spirit with which they have been intended, to help you when it comes time to writing your paper. So that's it in a nutshell. So if anybody has any questions about the pre-writing assignment or about the unit itself, feel free to reach out to me through Pronto, through email, and I'm also very happy to jump in the Blackboard Collaborate room, and that can kind of serve as a virtual office for anybody who wants to talk about anything kind of live and in person, or you just want to ask me questions and don't want to have to do the email back and forth thing or the Pronto back and forth thing. I'm here to help in any way that I can. So that's a wrap. I will get this saved and posted to the class, and I'll talk to you soon. Hope you have a great day and evening.